This next video is the what if analysis and the power pivot. All right. So the what if analysis, we're going to focus on the scenario manager and the solver. Right. Remember, there's also the goal seek and the data tables, which is quite simple for you to revisit on your own. So the solver, the scenario manager. If you want to create a scenario for this, maybe you're creating a scenario for your semester marks and exam marks. And that's what I've just chosen for this. So let's zoom into this one. So this scenario manager is found on the data tab, forecast group, what if analysis. So you see scenario manager, goal seek, and data table. So we want scenario manager for now. And then we're gonna add a scenario, right? We'll call it high grades, right? So high. And the changing cells are going to be your exam mark. Maybe it's just your exam mark, right? So usually changing cells are many, but just my exam mark because that's the only one that I haven't written. And I click on okay. Then in this scenario, I'll say maybe I get 75%, right? So I click and then add. Maybe I have my low grades, right? And then this time C6, still the same cell. I click on OK. And maybe my low grade is 62%, right? So, okay, those are my two scenarios. I could create a summary report from these two scenarios by clicking on summary, and I choose my result cell. In this case, C7 has already been chosen, but there we go. C7 is my result cell. It can be a scenario summary or scenario pivot table report. I just want a normal scenario summary, so I click on OK. So it tells me there the current values is 0, and if those current values, I'd get 72%, right? Um, and then if I get a high values, I get 78%. And if I get the low values, I get 72% as well. So in this case, this is just the value that's there because of this. It should be something like 40 something, right? But that's fine. Sometimes you'd even go and delete this column, right? Because it wouldn't be telling you anything. But that's how you use your scenario manager and create a scenario summary report. Next, your solver. If you wanted to work with your solver here, so this time it's more complex. I've got 3 assignments that I've done, and I haven't done the test and the final exam. So I don't know my final marks, but if I get 50s in both of these, I'd end up with 55. So with some constraints, I'm going to try to figure out how I can get an even higher mark for my final mark, right? So I go to my solver, which is on my data tab. It's usually in the analyze group. So if I need to add the solver, the easiest method that I believe is going to the developer tab. You go to Excel add-ins and then you tick solver there. You click on OK. All right. And then if you go to your data tab, you'll see your solvers now there. So you click on solver and then you choose what you're going to, what you want to edit. So it's like a goal seek, but a more advanced goal seek. So you want to set objective. And in this case, I want cell F10 to be maximized, right? So I want a maximum value of F10 by changing these two cells that I haven't written, all right? But they are constraints. So maybe I feel like, look, first constraint is that for my test, right, which can have a defined name. So let's say I have a defined name for test. So for my test, I want, I can only go up to, so it's going to be less than or equal to um, 80% because I don't have enough time to study. And then I can add another constraint where for my exam, and this is another defined name, and if you're told to use defined names, please use defined names. It can only be less than or equal to 92 because maybe I don't have enough time to study. And those are my two constraints. So I click on OK. All right. And you see there's many solving methods, right? We can just use GRG nonlinear. And then I click on solve. All right. So to tell me that if I do that, if I get 80 and 92, I get 85%, right? So this is a simple problem because it's like not so limiting, right? It's just that it just wants to maximize it, right? So there we go. And if I want to keep my solution, I keep my solution. If I want to create a report, an answer report, sensitivity report, I click on it and I click on OK to create my report. All right. If I want to go back to my solver parameters dialog box, I tick this and I click on OK. So you'll see my answer report is created because I selected my answer report. So as soon as I click on OK, the answer report gets created. If I'm back here, what I could do is maybe save this. So maybe I want to save it into this cell next to the information, and I save it there. So now it tells me all the information, and then I can close this. All right. So that's how you use the solver. And then you might be wondering, okay, how would I use the power pivot, right? So the power pivot, what we're going to do with the power pivot is we might want to import some data, right? So let's see if I have data, and hopefully I'll share that data with you. So if I want to import data, uh, hmm, right, let's see what data I can think of, right? So get data, I'll import it from a file. Um, so a trick that we've learned is that if you don't know, let's say you don't know that a date how to get access, right? Maybe you're asked to import an access database and you don't know that this is where you have to go. You could just use from file and from PDF. From PDF shows you all your files, all file types. So it's easy because it shows all file types, right? So maybe in my case, let me look for a data set that will be appropriate. Okay, so I found a file that we used most classes for module 11 and 12 of Excel. So I find my file, I click on import, and then once I click on import, I look for the tables that I want to add to my um, data model. For example, maybe I want to add um, technical stuff as well as, so I'd have to select multiple technical stuff as well as ooh, this is not a very good file for that. Okay, let me just find a different file. All right, after a long search I found the appropriate file. So I find my file, I click on it, and I click on import, and there we go. So when I'm importing, I have two tables that I can import from. So I select multiple tables, and then I select both the tables, right? And then remember, always never click on load. Never, ever, ever click on load. You click on the drop down, then click on load to, so that you can choose how you will load your data. So in my case, I want to only create a connection, all right? And I want to add to the data model, all right? So I'm not actually adding it uh, to my worksheet. I'm just adding it as a connection, and I want it in the data model. So I click on OK. So you'll see that my tables will be coming in the queries here, or there'll be a query for all these tables and the connections for these tables, but it's not being added to the worksheet. All right, so it will take a bit of time to load, but there we go. All right, so there we go. So now, how do I use this? I can use it in a pivot table. So I go to my insert tab, click on the drop down, and instead of just using it straight away, I choose from data model. That's how I use it from my data model, right? So this is added to the data model. Remember, we ticked it, so we can click from data model. And then I can create the pivot table in the existing worksheet in cell A2, for example, and I click on OK. So there we go, we have the pivot table. So from the deliveries worksheet, um, I could take the delivery charge, not the delivery charge, let's do the package type and put this into columns. And then I could also take the delivery charge and put it into values. And then from the employees worksheet, I could take um, the location and put it into rows, right? So you'll see all the values look the same because there's no connection, and it even tells you that there's no connection. So how do I make my connection? I need to go to the Power Pivot. How do I get to the Power Pivot? Remember, go to the developer. It's a COM add-in, and then you choose Power Pivot, Microsoft Power Pivot for Excel. You click on OK. Now you have the Power Pivot tab. So here you go to Manage, and once your Power Pivot opens, you'll be able to create a relationship. So in this, you go to the diagram view, and to create a relationship, you're told employee ID in here is the same as employee ID there. So if you drag those employee IDs together like that, and then you close your Power Pivot, you'll see that now because there's a relationship, the relationship warning is gone. But now that there's a relationship, the values now make more sense there. You see that the values are actually different and they're making more sense because now it knows which which office delivered the corresponding packages and whatever. All right, so that's how you work through your Power Pivot. You may try play around with the Power Pivot, try play around with your what if analysis as well. All right, thank you for listening. The next video will cover other stuff, including word art, data analysis, 3D referencing, global referencing, and XML.